Now, starting from scratch, and I deliberately haven't shown you a preview of anything that is to come because I want us to be in this journey together and we can all work towards it and see it as it evolves and know that we are the ones accomplishing all of this. So the first thing that we want to do is find our server folder having already installed XAMPP, and we go to C, XAMPP, htdocs, and then we create a new folder inside of this folder. So each time we have a new site or a new web application that we're going to be building, we want to create a new folder, and that folder will be our baseline for everything else to come. So the first thing I want to do is create this folder, and I'm going to call it attendance. All right, so that is our new project, attendance. The next thing I want to do is open this project in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to open up Visual Studio Code and get that synchronization underway. Now, I had a previous project open, and that's fine. You may have been doing other things, that's okay. But you can always get started by going to File, go to Open Folder, and then you find the folder, which is C, XAMPP, htdocs, and then you select the one that you know is going to be your baseline, and then you select, and then you let Visual Studio Code reorganize itself accordingly. We have a very empty folder, so this is what your interface is going to look like at the end of it. Now, by this stage, we're already comfortable with the PHP pattern. And if not, you can always backtrack to my previous videos where I went through step by step with how PHP interacts with HTML and how we get everything working. Now, the first thing that always goes into any PHP website is a PHP page called index. So index is always going to be your first file, should always be your first file, and that would represent maybe your homepage. But once again, every web server always looks for a file called index to load first. Next, I'm going to go ahead and build out the folder structures, because for other files that aren't necessarily website files, we don't want everything happening at the same level. So I'm just going to break them out into different folders. So I'm going to add a new folder just by clicking this new folder button here in Visual Studio Code. And the first folder I'm going to add is what we call includes. So my includes folder will have, well, we went through include and require. What happens is that sometimes we have external files, maybe helper files with like a class or layout files. We can put them in here and then we just reference them as we go along. So I have an includes folder. I'm going to create a CSS folder because maybe we'll have style sheets. I'm going to create a scripts folder, and be careful when adding folders, because if you have the folder selected and you click new folder, then it's going to try and add it underneath that. So I always suggest that you click, make sure nothing is selected, and then you click new folder. All right. So we have scripts, because maybe we'll have jQuery or JavaScript code running in our site. And I'm going to create one and call it DB. DB short for database. All right, because, well, maybe I want the code files that will be interacting with the database specifically in a folder. So that's why I'm doing this separation. So anything that you see at the root here, what we call the root of the folder, would be a direct website file, and everything else in a folder is just for referencing purposes. But once again, this delineation is occurring because we don't want everything in one place. Now, the first thing I want to do is start doing my layout for my page. So in previous videos, I would have mentioned that you can always do HTML:5, and you would get what I call the HTML skeleton that every web page should have at the very least. All right. But then I want to take this a step further, and I want to use Bootstrap for my layouts. So just as a reminder, we can go to getbootstrap.com, and there you will see all of the documentation relating to Bootstrap. So you can just go ahead and click that. And when you go to documentation, you'll see all of the documentation as it relates to Bootstrap. So I could actually just use this skeleton where they're giving me the same tags as is standard, but they're also giving me the style sheet references that I need for Bootstrap, so that once I put that in my site, any HTML page that I have that makes reference to these automatically has Bootstrap built in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code from the Bootstrap website, and I'm going to use it to replace the existing code in Visual Studio Code. And so now I have a Bootstrap ready index page. Now, once again, for every page that I would like to have these styles and all of the Bootstrap code, I would have to actually copy and paste this code each time. And one way that I'm going to reduce the need for that or eliminate the need for that is to start using my includes. So I'm going to create 2 files here in includes, and I'm going to call one header.php and the other one, and still in the includes folder, I'm going to call the other one. So you can always click the folder to make sure that you're selecting the folder so that when you add new file, it goes directly into that folder. And the other one is footer.php. Now I want my layouts to be a one-time activity, meaning I want to set up my references one place, and if I have to set up a nav bar, I want everything to be one place. So, or do it one time rather. So instead of doing it every time I have a new page, I'm just going to do it one time and make reference as necessary. And so I put the code in my index page, but what I'm going to do is remove it and segment it into the relevant pages. So my header.php should have code that goes at the top of the page, and the footer.php should have code that goes at the bottom of the page. And this code should be code that doesn't ever change on a page. So you'll notice that most websites, they're consistent. Every page, the nav bar looks the same and the footer looks the same. All right, the footer is the last part of the page. Most websites are standardized that way. So we're going to join that revolution, and we're going to make sure all of our sites are standard, or our site right now is standardized with all, again, across all pages. Sorry. So what I'm going to do is take from body, because every page starts with body. What comes in between body is unique to the page. All right. So I'm going to take from body going all the way up. So from doc type to body, I'm going to cut from the index page, and I'm just going to place it in the header page. All right. So every page that references header is going to automatically have that at the top of it. And then in the same fashion, I'm going to take everything below whatever content. So right now our content is just hello world, and that's fine. But everything below that should also be standard. So I'm going to take everything below whatever the content would be, cut that, and place it inside of footer. All right, I'm just going to space it down a bit. So all of these JavaScript files need to be referenced on the page, and all of these tags as well as the style sheet for Bootstrap, they all need to be referenced on the page. So then that leaves the question, where are the references? So what we're going to do is open a PHP tag at the top, and inside this PHP tag, I'm going to say require. So we looked at include and require, and the difference is that include will try to find the file, and if it doesn't, it just gives a warning and say, hey, you know, I tried and I didn't find the file, so I'm sorry. Whereas require will stop your website and say, hey, I can't find this file. So I'm going to use require, and then they have 2 options for require and 2 options for include, which would be the once. So you have include once and you have require once. This means that if by some mistake I accidentally required 2 or included 2 files, or the same file rather, twice, then PHP will actually try to include it twice. However, if I say include once or require once, even if I repeat this directive to require the same file elsewhere, it already included it or required it, so it won't do it a second time. So that's the difference between the require and require once, and the same is for the include and include once. So I'm going to go ahead and say require once because I really only want it one time, and then quotation marks, and I just end with a semicolon so that I don't forget. But inside the quotation marks, I'm going to put the path to the file that I'm requiring. So at the top of the page, the first file I need to require before anything else, even if I have other things I want to require, the first thing I should be requiring is my header, because my header has in the top part of my HTML body and potentially whatever content comes at the top of the page. All right. So I'm just going to require once, and I'm going to say includes, because that's the folder. All right. So the files, header and footer, are currently inside the includes folder. So to get to them, I have to say includes and then say slash and then header.php. And then I can just copy this because it's the same concept for the footer. And I'm requiring once the footer. So I'm just going to change this reference to footer.php. So as many times as I have, or as many files as I have in the includes folder that I need on a page, I can just reference them in this same fashion, of course, at the appropriate points. All right. Another thing that I want to do is make sure that I'm setting the title across all the pages, because it's set one place here and that's a static setting here. But if I have another page, like when we get to actually building the register and viewing stuff and so on, each page is going to have a different title. They all can't say hello world. So I'm going to make that dynamic by introducing a variable that I'm going to call title at the top. And I'm going to say title is equal to, and this, oh, I'm sorry. I'm declaring it outside of the PHP tags. So you notice that the color coding was not there. It was just white text because it would have rendered in HTML. So I need to actually put this in between the PHP tags. All right. And then I'm going to declare it before the require. And that is because, remember, in programming, everything is done in sequence. So if I reference title inside here, which I'm going to do, I'm going to say, I want to print title. And I can always just print static text. Well, I can't just print title. That would literally print $ title. So of course, I'm going to put my static text. So this is attendance as the app name. And then I'm going to say dash. So that's the static text. But then the dynamic part, which is title, I need to wrap it inside the PHP tags. So I'm going to say, open that, PHP, echo, title, and echo is how you print. So I want to print to this tag the content of this variable. And I'm just going to close this quickly. All right, so and there all my red lines are gone. So I'm going to always have attendance dash, but then relative to the value of title, whatever comes after the dash is prone to change. All right. So on the index page, my title is going to be index. And I declare it and set the value. And then I require this so that by the time it includes this file, title would have already been declared and initialized. And so it knows exactly what it needs to echo in this statement. Another thing I'm going to add to this project while we're on this topic is a CSS file. So there are times when we want our own little flair that Bootstrap in its native and default state will not provide. It does a number of things, but it doesn't do every single thing. So what I'm going to do is add my own CSS file, and I'm just going to click on the CSS folder, click new file, and I'm just going to call it site.css, and you can't use any special characters in the file naming. So site.css. All right. Right now it's blank, and I'll leave it blank because I haven't found any use for it just yet. But I'm still going to include it in my header.php. So I'm going to, underneath the Bootstrap section, add a link rel equals style sheet. All right. And then the href is going to be the path to the file, which is CSS/ and the file name is site.css. All right. And then I can close this. I don't need all of these attributes. These are the two major attributes that you need when you are including a style sheet. All right. So having done all of that, when I load my index page, I expect to see reference being made to Bootstrap, reference being made to my style sheet. The title should be reflective of whatever value I put there. And then we're going to see hello world, and we should see a footer. So I'm going to modify the footer a bit, and I'm going to add a div. And I am going to print inside of this div. Let me see what I could print. I'm just going to put a PHP tag, and I'm going to echo copyright, and I think I can do something like date Y. All right. Oh, and I'm going to concatenate these two. So I use a full stop. So I'm printing the word copyright, and then I space, and then I'm concatenating the year, the date. All right, the year. So date Y should give me back the year. All right. So that's what I've added there, and then I'm just going to close this div. So I'm going to preview this site as it is. So I'm bringing up my browser. I'll open a new tab, and then I'll navigate to local host, which brings me to my XAMPP dashboard, but that's dashboard. I don't want dashboard. The app I'm looking at is my attendance app. All right, so attendance, and then that should load. All right, so we have an error here. Oh, I made an error in defining the date command. The error was that I should have put this in quotation marks. So I'll just fix that. And then we go back and refresh, and there it is, 19. And I guess 19 is 2019, right? So you can look around at the date manipulation commands, and I have a video on that. You can backtrack to my video on the date time manipulation to see exactly how we can get different values printed out as it relates to dates. Now we're going to make one more adjustment, and that is to actually not have our content sucked onto the left margin like that. So what we want to do is make use of Bootstrap's, what they call it, the container. So I think in layout, you'll see something about how we can use a container div class that actually, kind of center aligns our content in between the margins, the extreme margins of our page. All right. And most websites kind of look like that. They don't always go extreme left to extreme right. They like leave some space in between. So I'm going to just modify my header and footer to accomplish this. And the reason I'm going to do both is this. What would happen is that I could say div here and close the div. So my content is in between these divs. And then I can say class equals container. And what this would do is actually invoke that class around hello world. So when I refresh, you see hello world moved and the copyright did not move. So my footer content didn't move, but my page content moved. This is fine, this works. But then the downside to this is that when I have another page and I need the same effect, I have to keep on saying div class equals container and then put in my content. So what I'm going to do is actually take this out, since this is always going to repeat and I always want all pages to have this code in it. I'm going to cut this and place it as the first thing in my body tag. So we're opening the body tag here in our header. And then after the body tag, I would have put this div container class anyways. So I put that inside the header so that every time I include a header or require the header, this is implied. And of course, I need to close it. So I'm just going to always close it as the first thing in the footer. So, yeah, I want the footer content to also get pushed away. So this is inside, this would be my footer. So if I just give it an ID so I know what it is about, I'll just say footer. So an ID is an excellent way to identify what your elements are for. So I just have a random div and I just took a while to remember what it's for. So if I say div and just give it an ID footer, I'll always remember that, oh, that's what this div is for. So that's the power of using IDs. But further to that, I'm going to put this closing div after the footer div. All right, and I'm just going to tab it so you can see where everything starts and stops. So this closing div seems random in this page, but then when you look at it relative to the header, it's opening here and it's class container and it's closing here in the footer. And so when I refresh my page, I expect to see that my footer content will also join hello world also inside that container. All right. And then just to close this out, I'm just going to make reference to the page source, and we'll see that everything fits together. Everything is snapping together as if we had one big HTML page. So all of this from line 2 straight up to line 17 would have been referenced inside of the header.php file. And then we have our content inside of index and content. And at the end of it all, we have our closing part, which is all constant in our footer.php. So once again, the power of doing layouts this way is that you can make the change one time in one file, and it ripples across every page that makes reference to this one file. Now that we have our layouts down, the next thing we want to do is start designing a form and start looking at the different methods of submission.